Started. For everyone that doesn't know me, my name is Roshni, and I'm going to call Sarindee my friend. We're all in Chicago, and I just love meeting people who do creative things and kind of just go with it. I thought it'd be really fun to just share. I think everyone during this pandemic has kind of found this new sides of themselves, and it'd be cool to just give it space to create without having any agenda. It just so happens that Sarindee did something really awesome during the pandemic, which is really cool. So I'll have you kind of introduce yourself, and then we'll kind of go back and forth about what you did. Does that work?
Yeah, cool. Thanks for putting this together. So nice of you. And it's so cool that you have an outlet for people to just get together and share ideas. That's awesome. So I currently live in Chicago, and that's how I know Roshni. But I am originally from Sri Lanka. I was born and raised there, and I moved to the US when I was 9. I mostly grew up in Georgia, but I have moved around quite a bit. And in my professional life, I do marketing and events. I study communication studies and media. So that's kind of my background. But I absolutely love writing, and it's one of my passions. Hence how we ended up here.
Cool. I'm going to go off track a little bit, just because you sparked some ideas for me. But what was like, when did you know you liked writing outside of like a classroom? Was it journaling for you? Was it kind of you just loved reading? Like, what made you realize that was one of your hobbies and not just something that you're good at?
Yeah, it was both. I loved reading. I've always loved reading. Both my grandmother and my mom were really good about making sure that they read to us as kids and kind of continued that on. Also, growing up in Sri Lanka in the like pre-internet technology, all of that, there wasn't really much to do. And so it was like an escape as well as a way to educate ourselves on the world. But I started writing when I was little, and it was really my grandmother. It originally started as journaling. She's actually a really well-known author in Sri Lanka, and she was a radio host, did podcasts, public speaking, and she was an English teacher for more than 20 plus years. So I like to think that I got that side from her. And she's the one, that kind of gave me a journal and really was a huge advocate of just like write your thoughts. And I'm sure you guys can relate, but being a South Asian, and I actually grew up, I was the only girl in my family. I grew up around all my cousins and my brother. And so math and science and sort of like engineering and all that, medicine was always encouraged more so than the creative arts. And my grandmother was really good and adamant about making sure that I follow my passions, creative and otherwise. So that's kind of how I started writing and where I got it from, I guess. But
That's an incredible start to your story, especially for that generation. I think to give you a voice without necessarily forcing you to realize what a privilege it was to have a voice.
Yeah, so true.
It's one thing that I learned a lot about my mom is that she gave me a lot of opportunities to have choices that she was never able to have. And I think it was not by her telling me that I had a choice, but just encouraging my creative side, or encouraging me to explore and do things that were considered risky in our culture, right? Like I didn't study science. A lot of these typical things that we thought. I was always a kid in school writing my own books on paper. I wrote a whole collection about this potato character that is still in my 3rd grade class. I mean, like these kinds of things my parents always allowed me to do. And you don't know what seed of creativity and how much that empowers your mind to kind of believe in yourself. It's kind of cool that this is where it's ended up.
Totally.
And trace back to that. I had no idea.
Yeah, that's so special.
So I have a 2-part question for you. One is, was there like did a language barrier growing up, or like, did you learn English through reading? And then kind of like, do you have a favorite children's book what's the language of Sri Lanka? I don't even know, but.
Oh, well, there's 3.
Okay.
Yes, I did grow up learning a little bit of English. We have the national language is Sinhalese. That's what I speak predominantly, and that was my first language. But Tamil and English are also like second languages in Sri Lanka. So I went to private school, and in private schools, you have to learn all 3. So the classes are taught in Sinhalese, but English and Tamil are taught like the way we learn Spanish and French and German and all that.
And
here.
do you have favorite children's books from those languages before?
I do
in that time?
like, I have like childhood children's books favorites that are Sinhalese. I don't think I ever had any Tamil books, but yeah, also English books. That is how I learned English first, is through like reading initially.
Just curious. I feel like a lot of my children's books that were in Hindi or Gujarati were all based on like religion and not necessarily like stories, you know?
Yeah. No, I think like all the Sinhalese books that I had were very like cultural, but they were also localized. It wasn't about like anything else. It was just like little story, like local village stories. It wasn't about anything of like greater substance than that.
Got it. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so I had no idea. That kind of threw a loop through my plan, but we're here because you published a children's book, which is badass. And I kind of want to go backwards and figure out kind of when did this idea, clearly you had this history and passion for like reading and writing for a long time. You're a very creative person. You work in marketing, you put things together. So you had all these skill sets, obviously, and all these passions, but kind of what sparked this idea originally? And then how did it kind of manifest from idea into production? And what was that process like for you?
So originally, I mean, I always knew I wanted to publish books. But like I say, I write a lot, so I didn't know like what medium exactly, but I love kids. They're the best kind of humans in the world. And so I think like it was always in the back of my mind to do a children's book potentially one day. But I had no idea what it was going to be about or anything like that. I obviously like love Sri Lanka and had that in the back of my mind too, but it didn't really come together until the pandemic happened, and it allowed me the space and time to actually put it into action. But also until I started being with Raj, who Melanie is my fiance. So, you know, Raj is Indian American, Gujarati, Hindu, and I'm obviously Sri Lankan American, Sinhalese Buddhist. And so we're getting married soon, and I think a lot about raising our kids and what that'll be like. And obviously, you know, they'll be American, but I want them to just be educated on both their parents' backgrounds. And in thinking about that, I was just looking up books and things, and I found that there was a lot of books catered to like Indians or Indians living abroad and kids being raised here, about culture, tradition, India in general. And when I tried to look up the same for Sri Lanka, there was like nothing.
Yeah.
And one, there was nothing in English. And two, it was just like not really catered to kids being raised here or abroad in general. And one of my favorite books growing up, like in English, was Goodnight Moon. And so I think I kind of like, that's where I got the idea, because I think The Goodnight Moon has become a series now, where like a spinoff, I don't know what to call it. So there's like Goodnight Chicago, Goodnight India, like Goodnight Mumbai, like it just, you know, spans to a lot of different places, and they didn't have one for Sri Lanka. And so that's initially how I got inspired to do it. And then, yeah, like I said, the pandemic allowed me a lot of time. So initially I just wrote down like my experiences and how where I grew up going to in Sri Lanka, and you know, what I think of when I think of each part of the island. And oh my goodness, look at this. Oh, hi.
You're looking at? Oh, a baby. Hi.
Yeah. Oh, she's so cute.
Melanie, we'll feature you in a moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
But does your daughter want to ask a question? So we can interject this interview for a question. We'll unmute you. Go ahead.
We're watching Daniel Tiger.
Oh. What are you reading right now, though?
This one.
Oh.
She loves it. But go ahead. She wanted to say hello.
He's so cute. Hi.
You are the muse to her book, so you're welcome to talk.
I know, my audience. Yeah, so I started with writing like just an initial draft, and then I basically did a lot of research on everything, like publishing, how to go about finding an illustrator and all that. And then I even like put out some query letters. Like I read a lot about finding an agent or like how to write a query letter and
What's a query letter?
So a query letter is initially what you send to a publisher to pick up like your manuscript. Like you send your manuscript and then this letter, which is essentially like an elevator pitch of your idea for whatever.
How'd you even know to do that? Like I had no idea this whole
It
process.
was just a lot of
we got to rewind a little bit. So you have this idea, you're in a pandemic, your fiance, husband, are you guys married yet? Legally?
No.
Fine. Husband to be has a very dominant culture. Gujarati Indians, I mean, we are a dominant culture amongst Indian South Asian community abroad. Totally understand, like there is a huge surge of South Asian awareness and it tends to be Gujarati focused.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time working in India, and this past time I was there was the first time I realized how Guju centric South Asian culture is here, because I spent a lot of time not in Gujarati areas this last time I was in India and realized there's a whole large percent of India that isn't following this model that I think Gujarati Americans are raised with, this NRI community. So it makes sense. Like I had no idea Sri Lanka was Buddhist. I had no idea it was an island. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, bad, but I had no idea. So you saw this total need and gap, which is cool. And you're writing this draft. So like, what did you like reach out to people who have had your favorite children's books? Like, how did you know like how to create a process for yourself?
Initially, I was like, let me just write about. So I also couldn't go home to Sri Lanka, I should say. Like, even though I moved here, I've grown up spending all my summers there. My brother and I, we always went home like once a year. This is the longest I've been away. And it was also a way for me to like bring a piece of home to me. So I was just writing about, we'd go to Ella and it's known for this, and we'd go to this beach and it was known for that. And it was just like a draft of what my brother and I grew up doing in different parts of the island and what they're popular and known for. But then I started just like Googling children's books and children's authors. I looked up a lot of South Asian authors, and the only like ones, I didn't find many, I should say. But one I did find was Tejal Patel, and she is
mindfulness.
Meditation for kids, which like what a great concept. But I basically stalked her on Instagram and direct messaged her, and a friend actually like introduced me to her. And so I just like sent her a bunch of DMs, and
she's great. She's really nice. I mean, she's
so nice.
Yeah.
Like she's like a big deal. So I was like, she's not going to respond probably, but it's fine. And she did. She sent me like all these voice notes, and she was so helpful. She was like, just do your research. This is how I went about doing it. But she told me about this website called Readsy. And she told me that that's been a great resource for her. And it's like a writer's platform where you can find like marketers, publishers, editors. Like,
what's it called? Can you spell it out for us? I'll type it in the chat box.
It's Reedsy.
Eedsy. Like a clarinet reed. Okay.
Yes. And so I went on there, and that's really where I found like about a query letter and just all these terms about the process. And so I thought, okay, I can probably, first I was like, oh, let me just figure it out myself. So I like wrote a query letter. I wrote like what I thought was a draft. And it wasn't really that good actually. And then I sent it to I Googled publishers that do children's books that are known in the area. So I did like Chicago and New York. And then I would just send these letters, but every page is like, it's going to take 6 to 9 months for us to even get back to you and stuff like that. So I'm like really, really impatient with everything in life. So about a month into it, I was like, well, while I wait, let me just read this again and let me just look into other things. And I read it again, and I just felt like it wasn't that good. I was like, this is not great. So then I thought, well, one of the things I liked about Goodnight Moon was that it rhymed, and like that's a big thing for children's books. So I was like, wait, I should find a way to make this all rhyme. So then I went back and I rewrote the whole thing, and I made it rhyme. And then I sat with Raj because I don't know if you know this about Raj, but he's like a rhyme master because he.
Oh, does he rap?
Yes, he does rap.
Nice. I'm gonna take that as a good skill. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah, he's a really good rapper and he writes well. So I was like, can you help me rhyme this better? So he looked at it and he did some edits, and then I sent it to my parents to see what they think of it, because they obviously know these places, and my brother, and they like loved it. And they were like, I think this is like perfect. So I got it to a place where I was happy with. And then I started looking into self-publishing, because I was like, well, let me just also see that avenue while I wait for any of these people to get back to me. And also, I did hear back from like a publisher. I was still reaching out to people in Sri Lanka as well, because I wanted it to be available there too. But I quickly realized like the two processes don't overlap, because I can publish there or I can publish here.
Oh, you can't do both?
Not really. Not the same version, at least. The selling process gets a little bit complicated, like the ISBN, the US dollars versus rupees, all that. So to get it into like just stores there, it's the same person the same printer I use, but they have a relationship with a Sri Lankan publisher. So I decided like, let's just separate it. And for the US version, I'll just self-publish it, because it just made more sense. But it was a lot of learning, because nobody really explains to you like the difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing.
So can you tell us the difference, what you've learned?
Yeah, so like the three main types are traditional publishing, self-publishing, and a hybrid. And traditional publishing is where like you have an agent, or you go through like a query letter and you get accepted by a traditional publisher, and then they basically they accept like your manuscript, or if you're an illustrator, your illustrations, whatever it is that you pitch them, and then they back your like finances. So like they do your marketing, they find like an illustrator for you, all that stuff, and they print it for you, publish it for you. But they also have like rights and royalties to that work. Most of it, at least. And then hybrid is kind of half and half. So you can retain your rights, which is great, and royalties, but you pay them in advance to take care of like the publishing and marketing and that aspect of it.
And by publishing, meaning like actually like physically printing the book, or like getting all the legal, do you have to get a lawyer involved?
Like
legal
the
stuff?
ISBN and barcode and printing it. And then self-publishing, it just means that you're backing it. You're financially backing all of it. So like everything from the printing, publishing, getting the ISBN, marketing, you're doing all of it. But you also retain 100% of the rights and royalties to your book. So
that sounds stressful. Do you need a lawyer for this process, or you can do it, you figure it out on your own?
No, I just figured it out while I was doing this.
And then do you have to like create some kind of like LLC or something to like, or are you legally like
you can do it under your name. It doesn't have to be a company. It can be a business or you as a person. But the route I took is because I knew I was self-publishing and I didn't have an illustrator, so that meant I had to find an illustrator on my own and all that. So before I got to that point, I thought like I would feel better if I knew like I've copyrighted this work just in case. Because if I'm gonna like find an illustrator, I have to send my book out and say like, hey, can you do a sketch of this, or can you mop this up for me?
So how do you copyright a book?
So that was also a lot of Google, but basically I did it online. So you go to the US Copyright Office for any piece of work that you want to do, or it doesn't have to be a book, like, whatever you have. And there's just like different forms you fill out. So there's one you fill out for a book and you like complete all the details. You upload your manuscript in the form that they want. And then, they go through it, review it, and then they send you like your copyright mail and the rights to it. I think that took like probably like a month and a half or 2 months.
So are you like doing this work on the side, and then you're also working with an illustrator to like get your vision to life, or are things kind of happening? Like how do you go from story to creation?
Yeah. So initially the first thing I did was the manuscript. Then the second thing I did was copywriting it. Then when I got the copyright, then I moved on to finding an illustrator. So I knew that I wanted to work with preferably a female, and quickly I realized it would be easier to also find a Sri Lankan artist because they know these places as well as I do. So obviously they're more equipped to make sure that it comes to life the right way. And again, I use Instagram to like, you can find everything on Instagram.
Yeah, it's perfect. TikTok, I
You
mean,
just,
TikTok
like,
and Instagram is amazing. And that's the
exactly.
beautiful thing of social media is like, yeah, you can.
It's such a
Yeah.
great tool. Facebook too. Facebook, like, I don't really use Facebook for anything lately, but the one thing that it's been really helpful for is like Facebook groups, which I don't think people know like how helpful those groups are, but they're like private groups that you can join for illustrators, for writers, for creators, that it's just like, it's like a Readsy except on social media. So through a lot of those, I was like looking up artists, local artists. I found like a lot of different illustrators, and then I looked to see like what styles I like, and I messaged a couple of them, and then I asked them, you know, I said like, I have this manuscript. Here's like 3 pages of what I want. Can you like mock up a few sketches for me? And then I really instantly loved my illustrator, Wangi.
Do you pay for this mock-up? Is it normal? Like, what's the going rate?
No, the mock-up, you can, no, you don't pay for the mock-up, but once you do, like once I did choose it was going to be her, then I like drew up a contract that just essentially says like, this is the timeline. This is like how many illustrations, this is how many rounds that will go back and forth on those. And then this is like your payment for it. And just like,
then you own the rights to the drawings, or can she get royalties on that, or how does that work?
So it's like depending on what you decide. So like you could pay a certain amount up front, then you can share royalties. For this project, I wanted to like retain the rights and control as well as like any money that I get from it. So I paid her up front as a project fee for all her illustrations. And then that's when her work essentially ended. But she's amazing. And obviously like, you know, I want the relationship to move forward too. And she was great to work with. So I did include her in like, you know, my site, the book, and any like marketing I do, I try to include her in it because she was just wonderful to work with. But yeah, it really is up to you, like how you want to go about it. But for me, it made sense to like give her a project fee for the entire thing because I didn't know like if the book like I sold any copies or what. So I did that, but she's so talented.
Yeah. Well, so are you. I think talent attracts talent. It's the fun of kind of doing creative work, is that you, especially when it's your creative work, you have freedom to kind of create the vision that you want. It gets kind of lost when you're working for someone else doing it, right? Because I think this kind of becomes, it's why it's therapeutic.
One of the things that Tejal had told me in her voice notes, you know, like if you have like a very specific vision, I would say that you should self-publish it, because if it's like your first book and it's like your baby, then, you know, you want it to be how you want it to be. And like, that's just not going to be the case with a traditional publisher. They're going to have their view and their marketing and what they want it to be. So if you have like a very specific niche idea, then just self-publish.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And I wonder, so are you selling it only through your website and on Amazon, or like, how does it work selling it here versus selling it in Sri Lanka, or like?
Yeah. So in Sri Lanka, it is, you know, sold in a different currency, but also it's easier. It's like just easier because the publisher / printer handles everything. Like the printer has a relationship with the publisher and the local bookstores and stuff. So like they'll print just like a local version and then they'll put it in their stores. And so that's like a whole separate thing. But here I went back and forth on it. Like, so the whole thing from beginning to end, like from the day I had the idea to the day that it launched was 9 months. And
really a baby. It's kind of cool.
I know. Like, yeah, it was like my pandemic project baby.
Yeah. But in numerology, 9 is a number of completion. So it makes sense that it kind of started and ended in that time frame.
Interesting. Cool. Okay. Yeah, I was like, okay, I thought that it would take like 5 months. So it was hard for me to be patient. But when I knew and it was here and like I had gotten, you know, X amount of copies shipped here, and I had all these ideas on like, okay, maybe I can do like a book event or a launch or this or that. I'll sell it on Amazon. And then it was just such a headache to learn everything that it is to like fulfill orders or like even send it to Amazon fulfillment and all that is another thing with self-publishing. Like if you had a publisher, they take care of all this. They store your stuff, they ship it out for you, they fulfill your orders. So when you have to think through that stuff, and even like fulfillment centers and distribution centers, a lot of them, they won't do it. Besides Amazon, they won't do it for you unless they're getting a perk. And usually the perk is that they print your book on demand. So that way, like, they get something from it. But for me, I already had it printed from Sri Lanka and I had the copies here. So I couldn't even pay a fulfillment center to just fulfill orders because they're not getting anything out of it. So I originally thought of doing it on Amazon through Amazon fulfillment services. And it just took so long. Like the process was tedious. And I just kept running into issue after issue. And then also it's expensive because they charge you like a monthly fee. Then they take a percentage of your sales and all that. Yeah. And I was like getting really impatient because I knew that World Children's Book Day was coming up in April, and that's when I wanted to launch. So I was like, I cannot miss the opportunity to launch a children's book on World Children's Book Day. So Raj actually gave me the idea to just like sell direct. And one of my other friends here, Gopi, she gave me a lot of really good advice. She works with a lot of kids, and she was like, yeah, I think like just make like, you don't even need to make it fancy. Just make like a one pager where you can just like sell your book and start marketing it, and like it'll take off from there. So that's what I did. I just built my website off of Wix and just designed the whole thing in like 2 days, and then got it up just in time to launch on that day. But it's really been great. I mean, I get all the funds. So like not that making money was ever my purpose of doing this. Yeah. But it's nice really cool to like now be at the point where I've sold enough for it to come back to me. Yeah. So yeah, I recommend selling direct.
So wait, how does that work? So do you take pre-orders before you? Because I didn't even think about like you have to get how do you find a printer or publisher to like publish your book? And you did it in Sri Lanka, so that feels like it's complicated during a pandemic, which sounds complicated.
Yeah, it was. There was a lot of delays
and then how do you know like how many to print and like what the colors right and like all that stuff? Like how do you figure that stuff out?
Yeah, so you go through like a lot of different rounds. I would say like the pros to getting it shipped or printed, published, shipped abroad is that the costs are lower, and you can like do more with your money. But the con is that it's a pandemic and everything takes so long, and so I had to deal with like delay after delay after delay for shipping and.
Like what if you printed 100 copies and you find like a typing error? Like then what do you do?
No. So initially we went through, they do what's called a proof. So my printer, we did one proof initially and I got it shipped here. And then I changed like the font, the alignment, just like the color, and then I had my illustrator who is in Sri Lanka go there once and be there for the second proof that they printed so that she could tell them like, no, I want the color to be this and that. In terms of like the paper and the binding type and all that I like did research on. So like I basically went out and bought a bunch of children's books that I liked and, to figure out like the specs, the dimensions, the paper width, the binding, all that. And I was like very specific about what I wanted.
I didn't think about that. Okay.
Yeah. So just like, honestly, like that's the best way to just figure out what you want is to like, there's already so many books out there. So to just like go buy a lot of different types and see what you like the best. So I knew I wanted a board book and kind of like how big I wanted it to be and all that. So then when I was going through the proofs, I was able to say like, I need like thicker board or like, bind this differently or change the font or this is the color. I just wanted to be like good enough quality for not just the US market, but for people living abroad. Cause I think the quality is a lot different locally.
Yeah.
Sri Lankan board books don't look like this.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's a different level of aesthetic. I think the culture around having a library is, it's just different here and people want to have something that they can display and keep. It's a keepsake. So especially your book would be something that they would pass down ideally.
Yeah, it's like more durable and stuff like that. So yeah, we went through a couple proofs. I had my illustrator go in for me. They would send me pictures and videos, and then eventually, like I think after 3 or 4 times, we got to like to what we wanted, and then they gave me like one final proof of that book as well. And then when I approved that, then I printed. So I printed 200 copies initially. And I sold out of those 200. So
Awesome.
now,
Congratulations.
thank you. So now I'm having 300 copies shipped over, 300 more copies shipped over here. But yeah, so that's kind of because it's also cheaper to print in bulk, which is why.
Okay. And then how do you, like in your head, like how much time do you think you spent on this? So you were working full time, it's a pandemic, you're planning a wedding, you have life and family and all this other stuff. So like what realistically would you say people should aim, like what did you do and kind of how did you balance it or weave it into your schedule? And what would your advice be?
Yeah, my biggest advice is just like, I think like just finding a way to do it. I made up so many excuses for so long for like, I don't have time. It's not my priority right now. And like being on the other side of it, this has been like the most fulfilling thing I've ever done, like ever. And I've had a very blessed career and have a very blessed life. So that's saying a lot. But I think like there's just something so fulfilling and satisfying about being like, I did it. Like it was hard. I didn't know what I was doing, but I figured it out and it's out there for the world. But I think really just make it a priority, right? Like those things are always going to be there. You'll always be busy with one thing or another. And so you have to find a way to weave it into whatever you're doing. And for me, that was like, again, like Raj helped a lot with this. He's like such a disciplined person with his schedule. So I took a lesson or two from him. But I just like if I had to stay late an hour to work on it or fit it in between meetings or whatever it was, I just found like a little time every day to incorporate it as part of my to-do list.
Yeah, because you're working internationally too. So are your hours different or how is that managed? Because I've worked in India and it's
sometimes like I get a call at like midnight and but for the most part, it wasn't that bad working with internationally. But I think it was just more so like devoting a little bit time every day and being really patient with the process of like how long things take and being very, very like just following up with all the parties involved and like you have to prioritize it because it's like your project. So the printer, the illustrator, all these people, you have to be the one to be like, hey, like this is a timeline. Do you have it yet? Can I see, like, so I mean, I'm a project manager, so I kind of project manage the ish out of this too.
Yeah.
And because it was the only way to like get it done. But in terms of like the day to day and my personal stake on it, I think I just made it a lot more of a priority and I gave myself a timeline. I was like, no matter what, I'm going to have this out before my wedding. That was kind of my time. Yeah. I also had to, right? Because I wanted to publish it under my maiden name. So
yeah.
I have to do it before the wedding.
It's a cool name. You should keep it. Do you know what your name means? Does it have a meaning?
My first name means true leader and my last name is like.
How defining. I love when names mean something. Keep going.
Yeah, it's a nice meaning. And my last name, it's actually like a common-ish last name in Sri Lanka, but it means like brave son, brave warrior.
Yeah. I was going to say earlier, you said that you're really impatient and I wanted to reword that for you in your head. Because now that I know your name is leader, warrior, strong, like, I don't think you're impatient. I think you know what you want and you're determined. And I think that's the rewrite in your head. Even when I asked you to do this, like, oh, it's no big deal. I'll just talk to you about it. I was like, no, like, this is huge. I think you have to embrace that this was, maybe it seems like everyone's publishing a book, but it's not everyone does. And I get it. Cause I think I do a lot of things that anyone could do.
Yeah.
And then I realized I'm like, oh yeah, like people don't put the effort in to learn about these things that I care about and actually try, you fail, you try, whatever. Yeah. So you should give yourself a big launch party or celebration or something. Definitely celebrate it. That's cool.
Yeah, hopefully when things die down a little bit.
I have a lot of ideas for you. We'll talk offline. Okay, quick question. So if someone has a book idea in their head, like what would you say? We're budgeting time. like financially, what should we budget in our minds? Like, what do you think is I don't know, like what's a normal price to pay an illustrator, publisher, like what's like that range you would say
Mhm.
to save or budget for, or
Yeah.
is money a hindrance of any kind?
Yeah, I would say I wish like people were a little bit more realistic with me about how expensive it is. Like again, Readsy is a great place. It to just know all the different like spectrums, and obviously it depends on what you do. Do you like what publishing method you take, what printing method, what quality you want, all that. But I can speak to mine, and I would say like the range in general, if you're gonna self-publish it, and let's say it's like 500 copies or less, I would aim to budget for between like $5,000 to $7,000, and that would include like hopefully your illustrator costs, your printing, publishing, like things like buying the ISBN, and then like other marketing materials you make for it, and your time. That's like including all of that. And then the longer the pages are, or like more high quality the book is, or the where you're printing it, like it varies based on that. But that's like a good starting point for like 500 books or less.
Yeah, I appreciate the transparency, because I think like you go to a lot of these like things like, oh yeah, you have a dream and do it again, but dreams cost money. Like
They
people have
totally do.
work and time, and like you can make a mistake, and quality paper. And I have friends who want the recording, and they're artists, right? They have paintings and drawings that they want to get printed into characters, and so that's quality printing that costs money, and when you're paying for it out of your pocket, it's your own passion. I think it,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah,
good to know that
it's
there's a number
100%
amount.
investment. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And then how do you like moving forward, like, do you envision this expanding into like a series, or like stuffed animals? Do you have a whole like idea?
If only. That'd be so cool. No, I mean, I definitely want to
I mean,
write.
I'm a dreamer, so I will definitely have it go further.
Well, I love that you're a dreamer. Don't change. I do want to continue writing. I definitely want to do more children's books. I don't know about a series, but I think like what this did is open my eyes to, one, how much of a market there is for children's books that are diverse. And not just from like South Asians or Sri Lankans even, which when I was writing it, I honestly didn't even think any non-Sri Lankan would buy the book. So it's really cool to see just like other cultures, other people get it. And it's also really cool to see like Americans get it and just be like, hey, I learned something about Sri Lanka, and so did my like American child. Like that's so awesome. But I realized that I love this like very niche market of like there's a lot of people like us who maybe like we're 100% this, 100% that, but now are like mixed race, multicultural, multilingual, and like that area is only gonna get bigger. Even just in my friend group, we're all marrying like a different race or religion of person.
Yeah.
So awesome. And so that means like we will be this generation where we're figuring out how to raise our kids in a different conscious way, to like pay respect to all those backgrounds than like what parents did. And that doesn't exist. So I love that there's a market for that. And I hope to like continue to kind of fill that space with kids books in the future. And I would love for like, thankfully this is done really well. My biggest goal in going into this, besides like just, having it out there and challenging myself, was to find an agent so that I can continue to do this like in kind of the more long term.
So did that happen? Did they like find you? How does that work?
I haven't. Yeah. So like there's different ways. So I think like if you sell more than 200 books, for example, then you can like sell at Barnes and Nobles. Then you can, when you're sending a query letter, when you're reaching out to an agent, you can like say that stuff. And there's just like a lot more that comes with that, because they know that, okay, now you've been able to sell a book and it's been like pretty successful. So they're ready to invest in you, kind of thing. And you just get a lot more confident with the process and just putting yourself out there. So that's my plan, is I wanted to get to 200. And then now that I have, I've been like crazy busy the last couple of weeks.
It's so crazy because like I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and I have a lot of friends, babies that I love to babysit. And I swear to you, there's like a lot of kids books that are just like splotches of like balls of color.
Yeah.
And the dot gets bigger at each page. And I'm like, this is the dumbest book ever. Like, why am I? And like, oh no, this is revolutionary. This is like changing the way, like, I'm not a teacher in that sense. So
Yeah.
I'm like, this can't be that hard, right? In my head, I'm like, a children's book is so easy.
Yeah.
And for me personally, what inspired me, so Malvi has this idea to do this for my mom and her
Yeah.
stories. Mine is I wrote a story for my two nephews because they were adopting a non-Desi daughter.
Okay.
So I wrote this whole poem for them, thinking I'd give it to them for Christmas. And then I'm like, ooh, but I want to like illustrate it myself.
Yeah.
This is why I do too much. And then I was like, ooh, but I'm gonna like publish it and then I'll give it to them as a gift, which is why it's not done yet. But this is, you think it's like not a big deal. Like I'll just print it out, I'll put it on my iPad, whatever. And then I'm like, oh yeah, this is hard. Like
Yeah.
just
Yeah. No,
all these little stops you don't think about.
there is, and you just have to be patient with yourself and realize like you're learning along the way. But the best thing is like you figure it out. Like if you really, really want to do it, you figure it out and you like make it to the finish line. And then afterwards, like you just feel so much better about it. And like I think like the first one's the hardest. And then you're like, oh, well, I can do this and I can do that.
Yeah.
And now you know how to do it. But it's just
Do you
like,
think your book also attracts adults? I mean, I feel like I know nothing about Sri Lanka. I'm like, now I want to read it so I can learn about it. You think it's catered to everyone of all ages, or you kind of wrote it with a kid in
I
mind?
mean, I definitely only wrote it for kids, but I have gotten a lot of messages from adults being like, oh, I learned a lot about Sri Lanka. And that's really cool. Cause like I said, I wasn't thinking about that when I wrote it. I only wrote it, one, for kids, but two, for Sri Lankan kids.
Yeah.
Or parents that are Sri Lankan and want to teach their kids about where they're from.
Totally.
But it's so awesome that it's also just been a way for people to get to know Sri Lanka in general. Like a lot of my friends here were like, wow, like this makes me want to travel there. And then I had a couple of friends who've been there like on their honeymoons or visited, and they're like, oh, this reminded me of our honeymoon, or this reminded me of when we were there. So that's really cool. I guess I can say now that it's for all ages.
Yeah. So I'll send a follow-up email to everyone that signed up for this, and you can forward it. Because everyone's asking kind of for links of all the places or any advice you want to type up for us to share.
Okay.
But your book, it's called Good Day Sri Lanka, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the website
is gooddaysl.com.
And so I'll add that to the email as well. But maybe we can also add some of the Facebook groups that you recommend.
Yes. Yes.
And like some other. I think I wrote down Readsy. It's time, we'll let the recording settle and stuff, but maybe make our own little resource for people to kind of go back into.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe, and you'll be someone's digital for them and giving them some support. So I know you have an Instagram. We're gonna create a Good Day SL Instagram page.
Gosh. Okay.
We're doing it today, so no pressure. It's happening. Make sure the name's available. Did you have to copyright your name or like buy it?
No, it didn't exist. But when I copyrighted the manuscript, the name is also copyrighted. So and then I had to buy the domain for the website and all that.
Got it. That's a whole nother process I think I'm learning about still.
And I did include that cost.
Do you pay taxes on the book profit you make? No.
Past a certain
considered income. Okay.
Yeah, past a certain.
Yeah, I never thought I'm like, how do you like count this stuff? And then I don't know, like just hearing you talk, like I want to connect you with a few people that do really cool stuff in CPS. I don't know if you're open to it, but just I could see you like reading or making this a whole like project immersion thing with kids in schools.
So cool. I know like a couple people like bought it for like Montessori's and daycares.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Yeah, I have a friend's girlfriend who during the pandemic switched. She's a music teacher. And she does this online music school. I think it'd be really cool for her to make a song that goes with your book and then have that be a class. I'll connect you.
Okay.
I have a lot of ideas. Create your page tonight. That's your creative hour project.
Okay.
You can do that and put all your headshots in there. And then quickly, what inspired the art? Like, is it you in the book, or is it just general? Okay, it's you.
Yeah, it's me, my brother, and then my dad's in it, my mom's in it, so it's the four of us.
That's awesome. And then did you dedicate it to your grandma?
I dedicated it to my family. I feel like everything I do is kind of dedicated to her. She's no longer here, but she passed away when I was in high school. But yeah, I do a lot of dedication writing to her in general. But oh my goodness, I like just hope that she's like somewhere watching, feeling this.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm Hindu, but I say I'm a Buddhist, but in general, I believe like nothing is an accident or coincidence. And there's, people paved the way for you to be blessed and have these blessings. So I'm sure she's so proud. And we can do another talk one day about lessons from the grief. Because there's so much, I think grief never goes away. People don't get it. But it's like, you learn from it, but you're also like constantly, it's like a sore, it's like, it's not always bleeding, but it's always a little sore.
Oh man, that's a nice way to put it. But yeah, no, it's very true. You just learn to live with it every day and how to incorporate honoring the people that you lost while you're here.
Yeah. This is so awesome. Thanks for sharing so openly, because I think you just broke it down so beautifully. I'll open it up if anyone on the call has questions that they have that are candid or things you want to ask that I didn't ask.
Raj, do you have questions?
Raj,